complaints about a priest who was hurting children? Or has that happened multiple times, perhaps?
Well, that's the policy, of course, in the Catholic Church. You're supposed to ignore it. You're supposed to bury the evidence. Everyone is silenced by the policy of crimen. They're all expected to protect child rapists and silence eyewitnesses. That's like the norm. So in terms of his particular incidents, though, yeah, like I say, in the last day, our common law court in Chile has been gathering information on this guy. And we're going to have more specific dirt on him and the role he's played. But as part of his role of bishop, when he was appointed quickly by Bergoglio as cardinal, don't forget, he was appointed cardinal in 2023, soon after Bergoglio and Pietro Parolin, the power in the Vatican, they signed that deal with the Chinese to allow Vatican Bank underwriting for the Chinese expansion, not only into North America, but South America. The whole Pacific Rim, the whole west coast of the Western Hemisphere is now being sucked dry by the Chinese. The resources, like I said, this Road and Belt Initiative, building roads all through the Amazon, to grab the resources. That's what these guys are doing now. And so he's appointed cardinal very quickly. It's kind of like that's why I asked you to put up that picture of Pope Leo from the Middle Ages, because it's like in the Middle Ages, the big families like the Medicis and the Borgias would get their son appointed as a priest and then rapidly become a cardinal and then become the Pope. This is what's happened with this guy. Prevost, Leo XIV now, is in like that into the Vatican. And the position he was appointed to by Bergoglio was basically he gets to appoint, in any diocese, he gets to appoint and supervise the priests. Now, if you're involved in the child trafficking, that's the position you want to be in, because you can detect child trafficking quickly, silence the witnesses, and protect the priests. So again, he's strategically placed to help facilitate this child trafficking. And in terms of this guy on the screen, Leo X, he's one of the guys who made the Reformation happen. He was the guy who excommunicated Martin Luther. He was notoriously corrupt. And he was the first pope in history ever to be described as a child rapist. It's very interesting. There's Martin Luther right there. It was because of Leo's intransigence that the Lutheran and then the other Protestant churches were able to break off, because he was simply a puppet of the Medici family to keep absolute Vatican control over things. Well, the analogy today is quite similar. You've got the two big families. You've got China and America and Russia, all as kind of the equivalent of the Borgias and the Medicis, controlling the situation. They put their man in, and it's kind of like history repeating itself. And I don't think it's accidental that these guys choose their names for that reason, right?
So Linda's asking whether we know the sexual orientation of the new pope.
Not at this point, but it wouldn't surprise me anything, especially since he's friends with William Auth. I should talk a little bit more about that. He and Auth knew each other. They're friends. Now, this guy, William Auth, is not only a suspected, but he was convicted of child rape in America and then took off for Guatemala. The Vatican never, and the Catholic Church protected him like they always do. He's living now in Guatemala, raping and trafficking children through this thing called Mayan Missions Incorporated. And we have a whole dossier on this guy. But he was associated with the present Pope at this St. Augustine College, where this guy got a seminary theology degree. They both worked out of the same college for a while, and they were friends. We know that from the people in Chile. They've documented this. And I should add about the Chileans, the reason that Bergoglio was very concerned about protecting this new guy is because back, I don't know if you remember this, in 2017, Bergoglio went to Chile and 22 Catholic churches were burned down just before his arrival by the Mapuche Indians, because the Mapuche Indians' children were being trafficked by guys like this William Auth and protected by the church. And they burned down the churches because that's where the children were being trafficked out of, and where the land deeds were, because the church would go in, like we've talked about, and grabbed all the indigenous land to get the resources for China. Well, when Bergoglio, Pope Francis, went to Santiago, Chile, he couldn't get out of the diocesan palace because he was besieged by thousands of demonstrators who wouldn't let him out. The whole place was in an uproar about his visit. So I just think it's not accidental that they would then put in somebody out of the same milieu to try to keep the lid on things, and to make Americans think, and this is a whole other piece, Americans now think, oh, the first American Pope. I guess we have more of an interest now in the Vatican. Well, that certainly serves the Vatican's interest because they want to get America on board as they shift towards China. It's a subtle psychological technique to dampen the criticism of the Vatican just as they're, channeling things to Beijing.
Okay, we're getting close to the threshold of using certain words, Kevin, and YouTube might suppress the video. So from now on, instead of saying trafficking, can we say transporting? And instead of saying the R thing, can we just say the R word? Instead of saying, what they do to these kids, the R-ing of them. Because we don't want YouTube to shut the video down. All right, so the next question is, why are these guys so brazen as to take pictures with kids like this guy on the screen?
Because they know they got away with it. Because they know it's not, a crime to do that to a child. It's standard Vatican policy to protect, people who rape children, violate children. So it's not unusual. It's just, it doesn't surprise me at all that a picture like that would appear. What's significant is the fact that he's tied now. We've already got strong evidence out there quickly that this present Pope is tied into these networks. And, with the present or the previous figurehead Bergoglio, right?
So a lot of people are asking about Trump. Right. And, what role, if any, has Donald Trump played in the election of this new Pope?
Well, if you remember a few weeks back, Trump dressed up like the Pope on his little site and said he wanted to be the Pope, being the usual kind of dumbass remark. But he was backing a guy called Timothy Dolan. He wanted an American Pope, and he said that all along. Timothy Dolan is a cardinal closely tied with Trump international banking interests. So that's one of the reasons Trump wanted him in. He does not like this guy because he wasn't in his immediate little sphere of control. But when you think about it, it helps him in his whole relationship with the Vatican, because now he probably thinks he has more leverage having an apparent American into that position of authority. And it's always a question of, Trump has never done anything that doesn't profit him personally. Like, for example, the private prison network that's expanding now because his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is a former lobbyist for the present private prison corporations. A lot of the people apparently being deported are in fact going into these private prisons. Trump International is in trouble financially, and he needs the resources of the Vatican Bank. So naturally he wants an American in there. I mean, it often boils down just to that, right?
So you're being asked whether the age of consent in Vatican City is 12?
There is no age of consent because time and again, cardinals and popes have made the remark that doing that, having said, yes, a child is not a crime, it's a sin. So they don't consider the violation of children and any of that stuff, even the more heinous acts against children, to be crimes. Children are born evil, in their doctrine, and with the original sin doctrine. So it's like, you see, these guys, the mentality doesn't change over the centuries. In ancient Roman culture, women and children were not people. They didn't have personalities. They were things, appendages of men. And so that hasn't changed, despite how much, like if you've noticed in the press now, they're making this new guy seem like a humanitarian. In fact, his politics are very on the right wing of the Vatican. He opposes the ordination of women, that whole kind of thing. So, I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. You have to understand what you're dealing with, and then none of this is surprising, right?
All right, so the next question then, is there a doctrinal reason for the violation of the children?
Doctrinal? Like I say, they believe in original sin. That's their doctrine. People are born depraved, and they're only made fully human by getting baptized and being a loyal slave of the Church of Rome. And And so, yeah, that's kind of on a doctrinal level, but in reality, we always know the purpose of these things. It's to traumatize people at a young age. That's how you control them. Do you really think that when you see these masses of people adulating this one man, I mean, where does that come from? The need to worship one man. It's certainly not biblical. In fact, it's interesting because when Jesus in Luke chapter 4, when he was tempted in the wilderness by the devil says to him, Satan says, I will give you all the power of the world. Just worship me. And when you look in my book, Dethrone the Rogue Power, right at the back, we have quotes from various popes. Pope John Paul II in 1996. Have no fear when men call me Christ on earth, for I am he. Pope Francis, Christ made himself sin. You need not go to Christ for salvation, come to me. That's the name of the Pope, Christ Vicari Christi, the one who replaces Christ. So when you say, are they satanic? Yes, they're worshiping Satan, the power, the God of this world, rather than God and Christ, who said, my kingdom isn't of this world. So how can people all do that? Massive brainwashing at a young age. Every government, every corporate power in the world needs that. That's how you keep a population in line. I think that's the real reason, frankly.
You're getting asked if you can expand on the case of Cardinal Pell, a former altar boy who had been violated, apparently ended his life. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, he was the Australian Cardinal, Pell. And Australia is, again, a bad area for this. The thing to understand is that these crimes against children happen, they follow the money. And so Australia, like Canada, is right on the front line of the Chinese expansion to grab resources and everything. And one of our people in Australia, Virginia Cameron, was murdered after she went in by herself, age 69, into a church and began to read the Doctrine of Crimen Solicitanus. I mean, they kill their opposition there. And they get very upset when their crimes against children are exposed. The thing about Cardinal Pell is he was one of the chief advisors to the Vatican Bank. And he was part of a faction fight between the Ratzinger and Bergoglio factions that put in Bergoglio. And he came out on the losing end. But in the course of investigating him, there were a number of eyewitnesses who died quickly, including children or former children who came forward to describe him raping them, R-ing them, if you like, whatever you want to do. However you want to describe it, violating children. And so, yeah, it's all connected to that. You know, it's kind of like, again, like I mentioned the other day, describing scales of the dragon or looking at the whole beast. Once you know the nature of the beast, these things are explainable, right?
So Anna wants to know if it's part of the satanic belief system to feed off the energy while violating children, taking the energy from the children.
Yeah, definitely. It's energetic vampirism. And it happens at a spiritual level, but psychologically as well. It's a technique as we, in terms of controlling people and inducting them into the cult, because one of the things that happens in these satanic cults is that they're intergenerational. So families belong to them, prominent Catholic families especially. And they are, the first child is usually sacrificed. The other children are trained to do the same thing to their children. So for example, Toos Nijenhuis, the Dutch woman who first introduced us into the Ninth Circle, into awareness of it, she said that her eldest sister was brutally raped and murdered by their own father, and then she was elevated into the cult. And she claims to have witnessed the manifestation of what she thought was Satan. It could have been some dark entity that was literally feeding off the energy of these children as they were being brutalized and killed. I've witnessed it myself. I mean, I've had experiences of that in Vancouver, which I can describe, which were kind of bizarre, but it involves energy, or whatever word you want to use to describe it, feeding off our energy. And I think that's true for us as a whole society too, where we are systematically fed off energetically and mentally by this system, right?
So Pam's asking, where are the parents of these kids? And Pam, when I watched the documentary about the Irish priest who was getting moved around America, it was like these families trusted the church so much. They just left the priest in the room with their kid to do whatever he wanted over and over again. So, you know, in response to the word of the parents, Kevin, is it a case of the parents just think these guys, you know, are, you know, representatives of God, and it's beyond their belief systems that they're doing these satanic things to them?
Well, when the Catholic Church says God, they're referring to Satan, their God, the God of the world. And people are deeply afraid of that. And I know because I've talked to parents. These are indigenous parents. And I asked them that. And they said, when you saw your children being dragged away and even raped in front of you by these priests, why didn't you do anything? And they said, we were scared. We knew that we'd be arrested and it would happen to us too. And it's at that level of fear. But there is, like you say, a degree of brainwashing that, well, I guess they know better than us. If you're raised with the idea that there's something wrong with a newborn child, that children have to be, you know, and this isn't just the Catholic Church, the whole European tradition of pedagogy, of educating children is the stubbornness of a child has to be beaten out of them, either physically or mentally or in other ways, and they have to be made to conform. That's kind of intrinsic to the whole Judeo-Christian culture. This Catholicism is maybe the worst manifestation of it, but I mean, it's part of the same mindset when it comes to do with children. That's why indigenous children who never had that were crushed so quickly, because they were, and their parents were totally trusting about everyone. They didn't think that people would do this to their own children. So I think it's a sign of the sickness of our culture that goes back many centuries. Right?
Yeah, I was an altar boy, and I, you know, was left with priests. Fortunately, nothing happened to me like this, but sadly, you know, the Catholic Church has become one of the biggest rings in the world for these monsters. And it's, you know, thanks to Kevin, who's at the forefront of exposing this, you know, that we can see the other side, and we can hopefully alert people so they can protect the kids and don't leave them in the clutches of these people. All right, so, you know, you touched on the ninth circle earlier and the new pope. Could you expand on that, please, Kevin, and just explain to people again what the ninth circle is?
Well, it's originally a European-based child sacrifice. It's a sacrificial cult, closely mirroring the Catholic Mass. Catholics believe that the priest transforms the communion elements into the literal body and blood of Christ. You're eating Christ's flesh and drinking his blood. Not like a Protestant who believes they're just symbols. But a Catholic says, no, that's literally Christ you're eating. Now, it's a cannibalistic cult in that sense, wrapped in religion to make people more palatable to people. But in the ninth circle, it's a copy and a reflection of the Catholic Mass, where it says, if the innocents, the blood and the body of the innocents, the innocent children, a newborn baby especially, will redeem you. And that's why they cannibalize the child or the newborn after they do it. Now, there's a satanic element in that as well, because they use it as a means to control people. It's believed that the Jesuits set it up in the 1500s. The Jesuits were set up as an army, secret army of the Pope, to kill any Protestant king in Europe. Their first job was to kill Queen Elizabeth in England in the 1500s. The ones who invited my family as Huguenots from France gave us sanctuary. I wouldn't be here right now. But it was the Jesuits set it up as a way to control kings, politicians, judges, eventually. They invite them to these rituals and then trap them, film them, entrap them, and then use them that way. Anne-Marie van Bienberg, a lawyer in Belgium, described how that happened to her, and how she witnessed all these things. So, yeah, I mean, it's all that playing itself over and over, right?
I remember watching that movie about Queen Elizabeth I, where various people were trying to kill her. So what was the reason they were trying to kill her?
I forget which papal bull it was, but whatever pope it was back then, basically said Elizabeth is a heretic. She, like her father, she brought in the Protestant religion in England, and she was a sanctuary. It was the only power in England at the time. It was the only place you could go and have sanctuary as a Protestant. And remember the Spanish Armada? They tried to overthrow her. and then it got destroyed by the weather. So I mean, it was power politics back then, you know, between Spain and the Vatican trying to overthrow the one Protestant power that was resisting them, along with Holland. So, you know, it was that. And it was also, you had to rub out a bad example, right?
Yeah. Is the new Pope Jesuit?
Not apparently. He's part of what's called the Augustinian